Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. After the press conference by John Ray, who's an attorney representing two of the victims in the Gilgo Beach serial killer case, after this conference, John Ray, the attorney, released two affidavits. These affidavits are absolutely bombshell. They have incredible information that tells us that the person, and these witnesses identify him as Rex Heuermann, the person charged in the case, was a menacing hulk of a man, that he threatened to kill people, and they link him to two brand new victims. These are victims he is not even charged yet with having murdered. So welcome everybody to the live stream. Happy Friday. You made it all the way to the end of the week. I hope you have a fantastic weekend plan and really good fall weather coming your way. It's been a really big day here in the Harvard Lawyer Lee house because Dad came home from the hospital and with no oxygen. So I want to say again, thank you so much for everybody and all your kind wishes and your comments. But he is safely ensconced in his favorite chair and watching all along with all of us talking about this case. So welcome home to Dad. Now, Rex Heuermann was arrested in July of this year. He was accused of murdering 3 sex workers whose bodies were found along a stretch of Beach Parkway in Gilgo Beach. Now, these murders happened in 2009 and 2010. At least that's when the people were last seen. But it was a full decade before their bodies were found. A decade later, bodies began to be discovered along this stretch of Beach Highway. No one was arrested, though, or I should say a decade ago, the bodies began to be found along that stretch of Beach Highway, but no one was arrested for 13 years. For 13 years, authorities looked for, considered who had committed these murders back in 2009 and 2010. And Rex Heuermann is also considered the prime suspect in a 4th murder that happened in 2007. But there was that huge gap of time before he was arrested and charged with 3 murders and named as the chief suspect in the 4th. Now, for much of that time, John Ray represented 2 of the families of victims who were found along that stretch of Beach Highway, because 11 bodies in total were found along that stretch of Beach Highway. Now, Rex Heuermann is not charged with murdering all of those 11. Rex Heuermann is charged with murdering only 3 of those 11 and the suspect in the 4th. In fact, authorities have said that one of the 2 victims, of the 2 people where John Ray represents them, John Ray represents the families of Shannon Gilbert and Valerie Mack. And of one of those, Shannon Gilbert, authorities did not even agree that she was murdered. In fact, I'll go ahead and share with you my screen and let you see what authorities said about Shannon Gilbert. So let's add that to the stage. There you go. And this describes an interview that happened. How and why did Shannon die? The medical examiner couldn't determine cause of death, but investigators don't think she's the 11th victim of the Long Island serial killer. Former Chief of Detectives Dominique Verone believes Shannon actually died by accident after running into the thick marsh and getting lost. But Chief, she was only 23 years of age. What would kill a 23-year-old woman? What would she die of if she didn't drown or wasn't killed? Moriarty asked. Shock, Verone replied. Certainly, she could have succumbed to the elements after a while, total fatigue and exhaustion. But then how did her clothing end up so far from her body? She's disoriented. She's in a frenzy, Verone explained. You have to understand the manner in which these items were found. Very consistent with someone losing these items as they're running. But how would she lose her jeans as she's running? Moriarty asked. Well, you're in mud, wet, they're soaked with mud, they're weighing you down. She's running in a panicked state, and the muck and the mud, and they just come off her as she continues to run, Verone explained. Now, that doesn't satisfy me very much, that explanation, and it certainly did not satisfy Shannon Gilbert's family or John Ray, their attorney. Wednesday, John Ray got some final opportunity, or an early, maybe I should say early opportunity, because who knows where this will go, but he finally got a chance to put forth part they believe happened to Shannan Gilbert. And Commissioner Harris was at his side, made this announcement, which certainly gives the appearance enforcement is taking this really serious. Blurry again. Wait a minute. I should be looking over here. Let me take a quick look. Y'all are saying that it's blurry, huh? All right. I'll see what I can do to fix it. It shows totally clear for me. I'll switch to that and then switch back. See, did that fix anything? All right. So, yeah. So really clear for me. As long as you can hear, I'm going to plunge on and hope that they're able to figure that out at YouTube at some point, because it looks, I can't figure out another way to fix it. So with this new information that came out on Wednesday at the press conference, John Ray sent out a press release to a couple of hundred people, and I was included on that, where he actually attached the affidavits from these two witnesses. So what I wanted to do tonight is do a deep dive into those affidavits. They're dramatic, appalling in terms of what they say about Rex Heuermann. They suggest he was a violent man. Also suggest that his wife knew of his strange sexual proclivities and was involved. That's what the affidavit suggests. They suggest he knew two other victims, Shannan Gilbert being one and another being Karen Vergata. Their bodies were found, all or at least part of their bodies were along a beach highway. And the affidavit suggests Rex Heuermann knew both women. Let's talk about it. As now, what I want to start out with tonight is taking a deep dive into the affidavit by the taxi driver. Banker by taxi driver by night. This relates to Shannan Gilbert. The second one relates to someone known as the swinger. Neither person released their names. Neither released the swinger relates to Karen Vergata. At the end, I'm going to give you a minute about what this means for the murder cases against Rex Heuermann. So go ahead and take at the affidavit. Let me flip over to that. And let me show you Shannan Gilbert too. This is Shannan Gilbert, who John Ray represents her family. Her body was found along Gilgo Beach there. And up until now, law enforcement has suggested that she was not murdered. Let's take a look at the taxi driver's affidavit. And what important thing to note is that her affidavits has a name attached to it. In this one doesn't even tell us what state or what county. We know that the no longer lives in New York, but don't know exactly where she does live. So we'll read through this and evaluate what we think about it. Now, point say is that although we don't know the name of this person, law enforcement does. So it isn't as if this person only spoke to John Ray. In fact, the commissioner said he was present during a portion of the discussion, at least a portion of the discussion with the taxi driver. And we know that law enforcement also attended the discussion with the sir that we're going to talk about next. So for both of these women, there was a law enforcement presence as they were interviewed, and the commissioner was willing to stand up next to John Ray. So what that means is they're taking it seriously. So let's take a look at this first one. I am blank years old. We don't know. That's how I feel too. I am blank years old. My date is, I reside at, I once lived in Suffolk County, New York. I'm giving my own accord. Sorry, trying to look through here to make sure I get to my right spot on screens. I'm not going to be able to see y'all for a minute, so hopefully nothing goes wrong in the meantime. So one of the things that the commissioner mentioned specifically, he thought it was significant that she didn't live in Suffolk, New York, because he didn't feel like she had a reason to come forward other than to tell the truth. It wasn't like she felt like she was going to get some advantage to it. And that was one of the reasons he said that he wanted to go hear what she had to say. So she says, I am giving this affidavit in my own free will. I am not under duress, nor coercion, nor the undue influence of one. I contacted John Ray Esquire by telephone on September 15, 2023. I did so because I'm aware that John Ray has been representing the family of Shannon Gilbert. By the way, the red numbers you see are notes to me to correspond to what my notes are so that I can talk to you about it. So that's what those are about. I'm aware that John Ray has been representing the family of Shannon Gilbert. And let me say that one of the things that was significant about this, at least in my view, is that this witness contacted John Ray. This witness reached out and said, I have something to say. As opposed to being tried, this person volunteered it. I trust him. I had seen him on TV. I'm aware that John Ray has drafted the words in this affidavit. He has done so with my consent and at my direction after an extensive conversation I had with John Ray regarding that which is contained in this affidavit. The words herein accurately reflect my knowledge and information. I adopt the words in this affidavit as my own words. The reason that that little section is so important, it's actually what I told you when we talked about the juror affidavits in the Murdaugh case, which is there is often a disconnect, or at least sometimes a disconnect, between what people say in an affidavit and what they say under cross-examination in a court. And the difference is that when people are under cross-examination, then they are being asked questions by someone who does not agree with them and who wants to get to the bottom truth of what they're saying. But when they file this affidavit, often an attorney writing out the words that they heard, that they thought, that they believe the person is trying to say. And sometimes there's just not a direct connection on that. So John Ray, by saying this, is getting her to think through the fact that I'm trying to put my head into what you're thinking and to write down the exact words, and you need to adopt them and make sure that they are your own. And that's why all of this is that's why it's there. In or about October 2009, and that date is really important. And the reason that date is important is because now Melissa Barthelemy, one of the people that Rex Heuermann is accused of killing, had disappeared in July 2009, but Shannon Gilbert does not disappear for another 6 months. It's 6 months until she calls 911 and disappears. A little bit over that, in fact. So I was a taxi driver in Suffolk County, New York. I was employed as a taxi driver by Colonial and other companies at that time. I believe my employer was located in Sayville, New York. My employer's dispatcher directed me at that time to drive to a little road off of Ocean Avenue in Ronkonkoma. It's so far away, Ronkonkoma. I'm going to go with Ronkonkoma. You can correct me if you're from there, please do, to pick up a customer. This place was a bar, not far from exit 59 of the Long Island Expressway. I was to have picked up a person named Matt. Now, we from other information we got from law enforcement that Rex Heuermann used fake names. That was something that regularly happened. But this was not a name that was specifically mentioned by law enforcement. We did hear that he used the name Andy when he was communicating with prostitutes. We also heard that he used the name John Springfield when he was doing communications. But at no point did Matt. That doesn't mean it's not Rex Heuermann. It just means it's not something that we have prior information about. When I arrived at the bar, I observed an extraordinarily large man wearing an Army light fatigue jacket crouched down on a very small street next to the bar where I had pulled up. He rose so that I observed his immense size. He approached my cab. He appeared to be wearing jeans and a white t-shirt. His hair was more or less light colored, but not blonde. He was a white man. I had been told by my dispatcher the place of destination for this customer, but I no longer can recall that location. This large man approached my taxi to enter it. His words to me seemed arrogant. He entered into the rear of my taxi. He sat in the rear seat, on the edge of the seat, and in the middle of it. He said to me words to the effect that we're going for a long ride in the woods, and indicated that we had to pick up a girl who was in a house across the street from the bar. My taxi was stopped very close to that house on a very narrow side street. I could see a white girl in the window in that house. I knew in the house where I saw the girl was open. So one of the things that is important to law enforcement and was important to John Ray about this description is that Rex Heuermann is 6'5". He's extremely big. And so that fit with what they believed, what they had actually found with Rex Heuermann. So what she saw fits a possible description of Rex Heuermann physically. I told the large man that I could not take him on the trip he had indicated, that I had to clear it with my dispatcher. He argued with me. He said words to the effect that, "Are you being a smart ass?" As we argued, he said to me that he wanted to kill me if I would just give him a reason to do so, which is really creepy. I think I would definitely quit taxi cab driving at that stage. He insisted he wanted to kill me. I heard him click a gun. While this occurred, I could hear my dispatcher yelling words to the effect that, "You got a gun on my driver. I see you. I got a call in to someone." I said words to the effect that, "I don't even know you." The large man had a sort of identification chain hanging on him, but I could not see the full ID. And it'd be really interesting to know what that could possibly be that might connect with Rex Heuermann. I asked him if he was a cop. He said he was a cop. When I asked him where he was a cop, he replied, "Brooklyn." Now there's a disconnect with Rex Heuermann. Of course, he could have been falsely claiming that he was a cop, but he wasn't a cop. And so that would have been a lie if that's what he said. It does sort of suggest that he was physically threatening, that he was violent, that he was easily angered, and that there was an additional witness, potentially the dispatcher, because the dispatcher witnessed, heard this, and the dispatcher could talk about it if they can figure out who the dispatcher was for the taxi company that evening. That would be an additional important piece of information if they can figure it out. But at this point, she doesn't remember, the taxi driver doesn't remember the exact location. So it's hard to connect her to Rex Heuermann in terms of where he was, or in terms of if he was at a bar, or if he had a receipt for bar tab that night. None of that really will work since she doesn't remember the exact location. The dispatcher, will the dispatcher have records back to 2009? Who knows? But that is a pretty long time to keep records. Okay, we'll keep reading. I told the large man to, went too far. I told the large man to just get out of my car and I would not press charges. Then a man whom I subsequently took to be the girl's boyfriend, as told to me later on by the dispatcher, pulled into the house's driveway. I turned off the car. I said that I was not moving, that I was not driving from this spot. I told him that he could have the keys and take the car, that he could have my money. I asked him, would he speak to his mother that way? He replied with intense anger that my mother is dead. My dispatcher said to him to just walk away. Now, there's another potential mismatch because it is, from what I understand, Dolores Heuermann, Rex's mother, is 93 years old and still living. She lives in upstate New York. So that would not be a disconnect. But of course, what he said that night doesn't mean that his mother really was dead. It's simply what he said and wouldn't match if that's the case. Whoa, I'm not sure what that line was. Okay, the dispatcher, the large man stepped out of the car. He leaned into the front passenger window. The dispatcher told me that the large man asked the boyfriend and girl for a ride, to which one of them replied words to the effect that, no, the cops are on their way. The large man went into a nearby wooded area and shot his gun off 2 times, according to the dispatcher. I had already started the car and I had already driven down the street when the large man did whatever the dispatcher told me that he did. I am curious what y'all think about that. I find that whole little section kind of confusing because how is the dispatcher knowing what Rex Heuermann or this man was doing if, in fact, the taxi driver has already driven off down the street? Wouldn't the only information have been either a video camera or audio within the car? I'm just unclear exactly how they would know this. Maybe they got it from law enforcement. But the shooting off the gun 2 times, again, an indication somebody violent, somebody with a gun, someone who threatens people and gets easily angered and threatens them for not really a lot of reason. All of those things are part of what law enforcement would certainly like to show about Rex Heuermann if they can connect them. As I drove down the street, a Suffolk County police officer in a white and blue police car approached from the other direction with no headlights nor any siren. The officer had dark hair, appeared to be in his 30s in age. I told the police officer that the large man had pulled a gun. The officer told me that he was responding to a call that the dispatcher had called in and a girl had also called in. I said to him words to the effect that he's one of yours. He's had a bad night. He pulled a gun. The officer's vehicle then crept down the street past my car. This is significant because this is a report that a police officer had done this. So the taxi driver is saying, this is one of yours. This is a police officer because the man in the back of her car had told her he was an officer. He had that card around his neck and he said he was a police officer. So she reported that to the law enforcement who was going to see him. Did that make an impact? It also suggests, again, sort of an echo of what we keep hearing about Rex Heuermann having significant ties to law enforcement, that he had good friends in law enforcement, that somehow there was a connection. That's one of the reasons that people said for many years, it took 13 years to find the person who had some of the murders because law enforcement wasn't trying very hard. That was what the argument was. We'll keep reading. I drove away to other calls. I told my family members about this incident, including my nephew, who is a police officer, and I told my sister of the event described. I also told other drivers of the event. And one of the reasons I think that John Ray put that into the affidavit is that it shows that it wasn't just that this happened. She never mentioned it, and 13 years later, she suddenly recalls this really vivid incident that she never told anyone about, that she's never reported, because that would make it seem less credible. And she's saying, look, this was credible. I told people in my circle about what had happened. It was a big event to me. Recently, I saw Rex Heuermann on TV. He was the large man I encountered in the incident described above, and he was the large man I saw in the incident I described below. We're going to hear another incident. I was afraid of him. I now know him to be known as Rex Heuermann. Super important because it's a direct identification of Rex Heuermann himself. Now, as I mentioned, there are some things that are off, like the mother being dead. There's some things that aren't quite right, but physically she believed that this was Rex Heuermann. She saw him on TV and she identifies him as the same person. The cross-examination, of course, will say, well, wasn't this years later? Who really remembers after 13 years? But this is her testimony, is that she remembered it clearly, and this was Rex Heuermann. So let's talk for just a minute, and I'll go ahead and pull out and talk to you for just a minute. Would this information come in at trial? It has obvious value to the prosecutor because the prosecutor can say, look, he's violent, he threatens women, he carries a gun and brandishes it about, fires in the woods, he hangs out with prostitutes. This is somebody who is obviously very dangerous. So the prosecutor would have value with that, but it's going to be hard for the prosecutor to get this in. It's not related to the 3 murders he's presently been charged with. He did not recognize, or she, the taxi driver, did not recognize or identify the girl in the window. I assume it was too far away. So this doesn't connect Shannon Gilbert with Rex Heuermann. And she did recognize Rex Heuermann, although there were some differences. Like this person said he was a cop. This person said his mother was dead. And the threats here were made not to a sex worker, but to a cab driver. So it's not a 100% no, but it would be more difficult to get this in. If this were, there's not a direct connection to the 3 murders. So his lawyers will say this shouldn't come in. It would prejudice the jury, and it's not a clear enough identification with the case against him for murder that it ought to come in. So that would be sort of the way the argument would go with that. So let's go back into the document and keep reading. In another incident, which preceded the one above by at least several weeks, my dispatcher sent me to pick up a passenger at the Sayville Motor Lodge on Sunrise Highway. I was told by my dispatcher that the prospective passenger had asked for a female driver and that she had locked herself in a bathroom in a room at the motel. I drove in behind the motel. I saw a dark, apparently greenish gray SUV on a side street near to the motel. I drove into the parking lot to the left. I looked for the correct room number. When I located it, I blew my car's horn and flashed my lights at the room. I did these things on and off for 7 to 8 minutes. No one had come out of the room. So let's think through what exactly they're saying in this particular section. So this is more than 6 months before Shannon Gilbert has disappeared. Now, John Ray is going to say in the press conference that he believes this is Shannon Gilbert and that this is a hotel known for prostitution. And he's about to say that now. She's about to say that now too, that it's a hotel known for prostitution. And that's where Rex Heuermann was. That's where Shannon was as well. And the two of them are connected. So that's why this story is incredibly important for connecting Shannon with Rex, for any kind of murder case against Rex Heuermann related to Shannon Gilbert. That's why this is so critically important for that. And I want to say too, for just a minute, the fact that I mentioned a minute ago that it's not totally clear whether or not this would come in evidence. When you get time to the actual trial, when Rex Heuermann goes on trial for the 3 murders he's presently been charged of, will it come in evidence? Maybe not. But that does not mean it's not critically important. And I wanted to play you just a little clip of the commissioner at the press conference. I mentioned he was standing right there with John Ray, and he made a statement about why these affidavits, this information is so important. So take a look. We'll take a listen to that. And may I say, there's a collective gasp in the pulling in a breath throughout the chat. Will the video work? We're all wondering.
I sat down with John Ray, myself and the members of the task force, to have that conversation about information that he may have, and let's make sure we're putting a dragnet out there regarding any information that's coming to us. That's why I'm going to continue my partnership with John. And if people have a reluctancy to come forward to law enforcement and they want to go to John Ray, then it's important that we take this information and then we follow forward with furthering the investigation. Make sure that we look under every single stone to see if there is any connection to Rex Heuermann, or if there is a connection to somebody else that may be involved with the bodies that were discovered on Ocean Parkway.
Commissioner, have you heard about or known about these affidavits before today? What's the time frame?
For one of the affidavits, I was actually sat down with the person myself. That just shows you my vested interest in it.
And let me stop for just a minute and talk about what he was saying. I have to say, I really admire that commissioner. That shows just such a degree of humility and desire to get the job done. To come in there and say, I'm willing to let you talk to him. I'm willing to let you talk to me. I'm willing to let you talk about Rex Heuermann or anyone else connected to this. I just want to solve these murders. That shows such a great attitude, I think, for a public servant. That is really impressive. I love that. And so now, one of the things John Ray made really clear was this hotel, where it was known for prostitution, was shut down by this commissioner. And he's going to say that right here.
She is called from her dispatcher to go to the Sayville Motor Lodge on Sunrise Highway, that infamous place that the commissioner here busted a year ago, and for prostitution and other illegal activities.
So let's keep reading then in the affidavit. I'm going to add that back in. Okay, we're going to keep reading. Then a very large man came out. That is a theme throughout all of these. He appeared to have a bit of a belly. He ran to the side street. He tried to block his face with his arms, which would have made him hard to identify, of course. Then a girl ran out. She was petite. She was crying and shaking. She entered my taxi in the rear right seat. She said that we had to get away from there. I noticed that one of her eyes had something defective about it, that it appeared to droop. Her hair was pulled back neatly like a ballerina would have done. She wore jeans and a shirt. She was not dressed provocatively. She said that she was glad that she had gotten me as a driver. Remember, she had specifically asked for a female driver. Now, this is really an important description because this is the link to Shannan Gilbert. And let's go ahead and hear. I'll back over here. Let's hear what John Ray had to say.
Shannan has a mother, sisters, and a boyfriend at that time. She had her hair pulled back, and because she often wore wigs. This girl turns out to be Shannan Gilbert. They speak for over an hour, so the driver knows her well and notices that she has a drooping eye, which is characteristic of Shannan, and also a characteristic of her family, by the way, going back for a generation or two.
That very specific description is critically important because it suggests this really was Shannan Gilbert. Up until now, there had been no connection between Shannan Gilbert and Rex Heuermann. So that obviously makes a really significant difference. Let's keep reading in the affidavit. The girl told me that she met the large man on Craigslist. He befriended her, she said. She said that he said to her that he would take care of her mom, her sisters, and her boyfriend. That's why that part of the description was important to John Ray. She said that he placed a thick white envelope on the nightstand in the room. She said that he told her that whatever happens tonight, this envelope was for her and her family. But she said that she saw a rage in his face. She said that when he went to the bathroom, she looked into the envelope. She said that the envelope was filled with cut up paper. She said that he shook her. In other words, he wasn't giving her the money that he had said he was. She said that he shook her and that he was aggravated, violent, physically violent with her, and easily angered. She said that he got aggressive, so she ran into the bathroom and locked herself in there. She said he banged on the door, all of which is a really frightening, aggressive picture. Stage, there's a very general connect to Heuermann because she said he covered his face, but she's going to be, the taxi driver is going to be more specific in a minute. The girl never told me her name. I believe the incident took place when it was still a little warm outside. The girl wore a little light jacket, a dark color. She had a pocketbook, which was not large. She said that they were always calling her to come out to Long Island. She said that she did not want to come out to Long Island. Now, that's important because ultimately Shannan would call 911 from Long Island several months after this. And when she called from Long Island, there's a scream. She goes running off. We'll cover that video, and we'll cover that 911 call in another video. But she screams and goes running off. Law enforcement gets there. She's not present at the house where they were expecting to find her. No one can find her. And it's in the process of looking for Shannan Gilbert, this whole thing begins, because in the process of looking for her, law enforcement finds other bodies. It's a while before they find Shannan Gilbert's body, but they find other bodies first. And that set off the entire chain of events in the search for the Gilgo Beach serial killer, also known as the Long Island serial killer. All of those things began thanks to Shannan Gilbert calling 911 that night. So let's go back into the video, and the affidavit. She told me about her family, including her sisters and her mother. She said that as to her mother, I would not be able to understand her situation with her mother. Much of our conversation took place at the Sayville Motor Lodge, or here's my next chance, Ronkonkoma train station. She had a long wait in order to take the 2 a.m. train to New York City. She had a distinctive voice. She was articulate. She paid for the ride and tipped me $5, which is really a specific memory. She then sat with another taxi driver in his car waiting for the train. because I had to pick up other customers. I saw her on TV where she was identified as Shannon Gilbert. I am certain that the girl was Shannon Gilbert. I recognized her unusual eye droop and her voice. Her story she told me of her family matched the family of Shannon Gilbert. Rex Heuermann appeared to me to be the very big man I saw coming from the motel room I mentioned in my affidavit. I recognize Shannon Gilbert. This is absolutely enormous for John Ray's client, for the family of Shannon Gilbert. Importantly, although law enforcement said this was not murder, they did not believe it to be homicide for Shannon Gilbert, her family had an independent autopsy done that concluded it was homicidal strangulation that killed her. So this is direct evidence that may have connected her to someone who is charged with murdering other people. If he is a mass murderer, if Rex Heuermann is a mass murderer, already killed 3 people at least, and probably a 4th, according to law enforcement, then it's much more likely, and he knew Shannon, then obviously it's much more likely that he killed her. When she made that call from 911 and when she disappeared, she specifically mentioned they were calling her to Long Island. This is very important connection between Shannon Gilbert, Rex Heuermann, and suggesting murder. Let's keep reading. I told my dispatcher of this incident. I also told the female manager at the Sayville Motor Lodge of this incident. The manager appeared to be a native of India. I told other taxi drivers of this incident. The dispatcher had the telephone number of the large man. And I wondered about this. Well, how did the dispatch driver have the telephone number of Rex Heuermann from this incident? Because it said that the woman had called and that the woman asked for a female taxi driver. I wonder if at the time, did she connect it back to the person she had seen before, in the months before at the hotel? I didn't know, but it didn't really seem, that seemed a little unclear to me what exactly that meant and how they were connected. Let's keep reading. I called the police tip line when Rex Heuermann was arrested. I spoke with a young woman and told her the basic facts. Flip to the next page, which I knew. I spoke twice with the tip line that day. I have never received a return call. She's mentioning the tip line in response to some of the questions that, in fact, came there at the press conference. Oh, wait, stop, not that. At the press conference, there were questions about why did they wait to come forward? If they knew about this, why wait? And I think one answer would be, certainly for this witness and probably for the next as well, they had no idea there had been a murder. They had no idea that this person was missing or had been a murder. They thought that what they knew was a microcosm of one night, and that was all there was. So, and in the case of the taxi driver, 2 nights, but that there was nothing more to know, nothing more to tell. So thinking about this second incident, now, will this information come in? The prosecution is going to say that this shows in general that Rex Heuermann was violent and scary with prostitutes and connection to Shannon Gilbert. The defense is going to say, look, he's not charged with murdering Shannon Gilbert. In fact, you have said she wasn't even murdered. You, the state police, have said she wasn't murdered. So it would be prejudicial to bring this in. And therefore, I think it would come in if there is a murder charge related to Shannon, but it would be a very significant battle if there's no murder charge as to Shannon Gilbert as to whether or not this comes in. The 2 sides will definitely go to bat over that. They will definitely argue about that. Now, the next affidavit was from the person known as the swinger. Again, someone who did not want to be identified, so we don't actually have a name to associate with it. We do know that it relates to Karen Vergata. And let me show you a picture of Karen Vergata so you can see what she looked like. This is Karen Vergata. It's a high school photo. That just seems unfair to me that there's not a later photo. Who wants their high school photo? So please be sure to keep your photos updated. That's just terribly unfair to show high school photos of people. But anyway, that's the photo that's available of Karen Vergata. She was 34 years old, and working as an escort when she disappeared. She called her dad on February 14th, 1996. That's the last time she was heard from. Notice how much before the other murders this is. The earliest murder Rex Heuermann is charged with is 2007. This murder probably happened in 1996. I say probably because, very sadly, Karen Vergata was never reported missing. The last time anyone heard from her was February 14th when she called her dad, and Long Island officials think she went missing that same day. Now, on April 20th, 1996, her legs were found in a plastic bag at Davis Park on Fire Island's Blue Point, but no one knew who she was at that stage. Her skull was found on Ocean Parkway with the other victims along that stretch of Beach Highway. That is not her whole body, those two parts, but that's all that's been found to date. They matched the two sets of remains with DNA, but they did not know who the person was. She was known as Jane Doe number 7 until August 2022, when she was finally identified using genetic genealogy. But no one had reported her missing, which to me is incredibly sad. It's heavy. Well, you'll see. We'll read the affidavit and you will see it is a heavy thing to read. I, blank, residing at a confidential address, being duly sworn, state as follows. I'm over 18 years of age. I reside in the state of New York. And then it has the same statement before about her being of sound mind and memory, coming forward to state facts she knows to be true personally, etc. I'm going to skip to, I wish that I have determined to come forward with facts within my knowledge, because I wish the truth to be known about Rex Heuermann and others, including his wife, Asa, and a woman I believe to have been Karen Vergata. I believe that great harm came to that woman. I believe to have been Karen Vergata when she was at the Heuermann home in Massapequa Park, New York, in or about Valentine's Day in 1990. I feel a heavy responsibility as to her. That is why I contacted John Ray. The Massapequa Park home, that is where Rex Heuermann and his wife Asa Ellerup lived, and she would still live there, but he obviously is in jail currently. But that is where they lived throughout this period and up until his arrest. So the witness goes on to say, went too fast, I'm a former swinger. I am 54 years old. A swinger is a person who partners with another person, then that partnership has sex with other partners or groups of partners. I formed a partnership with an NYPD policeman in or around 1996. His name is known to me and to Mr. Ray, and apparently I would assume to law enforcement, since they actually sent people who talked to this witness along with John Ray. This would be a potential additional witness, right? The police officer who was her partner and who saw these exact same things that or at least many of the same things that she saw. It also, again, is an involvement of Heuermann with local police. So again, there is that. Let's keep reading. I call him RW, that means her partner. He had been a police officer assigned in Prospect Park in Brooklyn. He became a detective. He was handsome. I loved that man. That was sweet. We became partner members of a swingers club known as Trapeze. I believe it was in Lower Midtown in Manhattan. Sex amongst partners there was common and encouraged, including on the premises. I believe that as many as 300 members and their partners could be there at any time. I and RW went to Trapeze and engaged in sex with other couples there several times. I saw others having sex there as well. Sex took place in rooms and in a big room as well. Several members were police officers. Several members were from Long Island. Members were enabled to post messages and contact information on a wall. Either Rex Heuermann or his wife Asa posted contact information for them in a house in Massapequa Park to engage there in swinger sex in 1996. I and RW chose to go there to the Heuermann home. Notice she specifically says that Asa was included in this lifestyle, that this was a swinger couple, that their home was their personal home was involved. That's relevant. From the beginning, law enforcement has said that Asa Ellerup was out of town at the time that the three murders, or that the three women that Rex Heuermann is charged with murdering, at the time that they disappeared. She was out of town, and law enforcement said she couldn't be involved. Here is a suggestion that she at least was involved in the lifestyle and knew about the lifestyle that he was living. We'll keep reading. In February 1996, RW picked up a woman I believe to be Karen Vergata in New York City on the way to the Heuermann house. She was hungry and homeless. She sat in the back of the car. She leaned forward and to the right. When we stopped for gas, she said that she was scared. I told her not to be scared because RW was a cop. She couldn't be safer than being with a cop. I told her to ask at the house when we arrived to take a shower and for food. And I mentioned after the press conference, I thought this was unbelievably sad. That's just such a sad picture. One of the things, though, that I want you to hear what was said at the press conference. Let me add this in.
Out to Long Island. But before they went, her boyfriend picked up a woman in New York, in the city, who had apparently just gotten out of jail, and she was disheveled and hungry, and she was a sex worker.
The affidavit doesn't actually mention her being in jail. The reason why I noticed that was because I immediately thought to myself, well, there's a corroborating. If they could show that Karen Vergata was in jail right before Valentine's Day, she got out in time to call her dad, and that would explain why she was homeless, why she was hungry, and it would be probably something there might be a record of. They could go back and find that and actually know for sure that she was in jail. But it didn't say that in the affidavit. It may be one of those things where that was said in the conversation. It didn't make it into the affidavit. That would be a really critical point for law enforcement to consider and for law enforcement to look at. We entered the Heuermann home by walking around the side of it. It was in the night. Oops, went too fast. Inside the house in Massapequa Park, it was dark. Karen went downstairs. I stayed upstairs with Asa. My partner, who, and she added this, it looks to me like in handwriting, I believe was bisexual, kept disappearing. I believed he was elsewhere in the house having sex with Rex. I believe I had sex with Rex as well. I never went downstairs. Now, we know that the law enforcement search of Rex Heuermann's house included great detail about the basement, but we don't know what they found. We don't know if it was something that could possibly connect Karen Vergata or any other victim to Rex Heuermann, if there was any sort of apparatus down there that would have been alarming to law enforcement. We don't know. Right now, that remains a mystery. It's something we don't know. Asa told me words to the effect that Rex brought her from her country and that everything she had, he has given to her. She said that she was lucky that he was rich. She said she was also, did I skip? No, I don't think so. Afraid of Rex. I do not know if she was truthful. So that's something, again, that could be verified. Whether or not, I don't know for sure that she came from a foreign country or simply had ancestors from a foreign country, but that would certainly be something that could be verified, and that would be a point of agreement between what the witness said and reality. I don't think that I ever went downstairs. I went towards the back of the house asking RW, where are you? He came out from the back, what seemed like from a room. I also saw a Christmas tree on the main floor, yet it was long past Christmas. I wondered why there was still a Christmas tree up. I believe RW and I were there at the Heuermann home on or about Valentine's Day. Remember, that's when they believe Karen Vergata went missing, right after contacting her father. I believe that because RW and I would swing on holidays like Christmas, Valentine's Day, Halloween, and other such holidays. So she's connecting it to likely a specific day. I did wonder too, this detail about the Christmas tree. I wonder if there would be any way to verify that. Maybe neighbors who would know that they either traditionally or one time kept up decorations long past, or whether maybe there would even be a photograph that would show that or suggest that. Don't know. I also saw 2 large seashells on a shelf in the house. I recall thinking that they were like shells from the country where I had grown up, country's name known to Mr. Ray. I'll go on and read. I asked Asa if she had friends from my country. I do not remember what she replied. I had also, well, I'll skip that. I'll go ahead and stop there and say the seashells would be another point that could be corroborated. We know they did a big search. Whether found seashells, they probably weren't looking for those. It wouldn't have seemed important at the time, but photographs that they came in and initially might show that, which would corroborate this witness's testimony about having been in the Heuermann house. I had also asked Asa if she wished me to perform sex upon her, but she said that she didn't wish that. I recall that Rex went outside and started a fire in what appeared to be a large barrel. There's a bizarre situation. Why is he starting a fire in the middle of the night in a large barrel? You just wonder. They lay at the press conference. John Ray said it was something like 2 a.m. Very strange. RW wished to leave. I went with him to his car. We left from the back door. RW complained that he lost his belt. He went back to the house to retrieve it. I saw the face of the woman I believe to be Karen up against a window at the house. She looked scared. I had a sense that she was calling for help. I told RW of this. The woman I believe to be Karen suddenly ran outside naked and ran about by the garage. RW had gone to the back of the house to look for his belt, but he was then back in the car. RW told me not to worry about her, that she was okay. They were only playing a game. We left without her. I felt uneasy that we left without the woman, which is terrifying if in fact that was Karen Vergata. And if in fact she disappeared, she was last seen or heard from on Valentine's Day, then this is very chilling because she is about to die. It's also very strange that she ran around outside in February in New York without any clothes on, because it would have been cold. This would be something that would suggest extreme distress if she did that. So we'll finish up. I saw Rex on TV recently in a picture of Karen Vergata. I recognized her as the woman who RW and I brought to Heuermann's house. I was shocked and deeply sorrowful. Oops, went a little too fast. We'll make it smaller and I'll be able to read. Deeply sorrowful for having left her behind at Heuermann's house. I told John Ray of these things because I needed to speak with him so that Karen would not be left behind again. Very, very moving, especially that end. That is deeply moving, I think, the way she wrote it and what she had to say. Now, she said that the reason she came forward was because she saw him on TV. After, and I'll go ahead and play you that little clip.
And she kind of buries it, forgets about it, until on TV she sees the picture of Karen Vergata, and she recognizes her and said that's her, and she recognizes Rex Heuermann. And so she comes forward, and I meet her, I interview her at great length. I also had the police department, we arranged for detectives to interview her, and I found her story. I interviewed her for 3 times for a total of 9 hours, and I found her story to be credible.
Really, really important. Then this affidavit has made a significant difference. And listen to what the commissioner says about it.
But it doesn't mean that we're not continuing to look at all the bodies that were discovered there. But the ones right now that John has, when it comes to Ms. Vergata and when it comes to Ms. Gilbert, are the ones that we're going to take a closer look at and see if they're connected to our defendant.
They are actually then taking another look at the case. They are taking a look at whether or not there is, in fact, a murder of Shannan Gilbert, and at whether or not Rex Heuermann may be the person who murdered Shannan Gilbert. And they're looking at the same thing for Karen Vergata. Unbelievably important. In addition, there is information now about Asa Ellerup being at home and having knowledge of this lifestyle, being there when a woman was running around naked outside their house and looking distressed. This does not mean that she was involved in the murders, puts her there in a new and different sense from anything we had information about before. If in fact Karen Vergata was murdered within a very short period of time from Valentine's Day, it would certainly be very damaging for Asa Ellerup. But right now, the line is very squishy. There's no about when it happened, and there is no actual evidence that whoever the woman is, even if everything holds up and the witness was correct, she was there at the Heuermann house, there was a woman running around outside without her clothes on, she looked scared. Even if all of that is true, there's no connection yet to a murder. So we're a step away. We're several steps away from this being a case. And the commissioner was very careful not to say he believed these or that he was going to act on them. Here's what he said instead.
We're going to make sure we're doing our job and trying to nail down time frames, look at radio runs and other things that could help us kind of pinpoint if there's any credibility to these complaints that came forward. When I first came into this position.
So what we've seen from these affidavits is extremely dramatic testimony suggesting that Rex Heuermann was violent, carried a gun, that they knew this was Rex Heuermann. They connected him to these incidents and directly connected him to 2 other victims who were found along that stretch of Gilgo Beach Highway. Unbelievably important, because there was no connection between him and the other witnesses, or for that matter, to the ones he's been charged of, in terms of a witness having seen them together. There was someone who said they saw a large man with a car that matched his car with one of the other victims. But this is the first time anyone else has been linked to Rex Heuermann or someone described as Rex Heuermann by these witnesses. Unbelievably important affidavits. And so I hope you've enjoyed looking at them. And tomorrow night, I mentioned this all week long, that we are going to be doing Corey Richens. We are going to take a look at the transcript of her phone call with her brother. We are going to be looking at that tomorrow night. It's really fascinating. You are going to be fascinated to hear what she had to say to her brother, and we're going to take a look at that, whether it's going to hurt her when it comes to that Walt the dog letter. We're going to be going over all that tomorrow night. So bonus live stream tomorrow at 7. But I also want to tell you what we're going to be doing next week, because on Monday, I am going to start covering the Markel trial by huge acclamation and great demand. Already done this little graphic for you. I'll just give you a little preview. So this is what will be coming on Monday. We're going to be talking about the Markel case. The trial actually begins, jury selection begins on Monday. So I'll just do an overview, and we'll probably, they're not going to start the trial next week. That's going to be reserved for jury selection. So we will start with that, and we'll do an overview of the case. So you'll be ready to go on it while they're doing jury selection, and we'll be ready. I am planning to cover that every day or nearly every day as we go through the trial. The trial will be broadcast, and so it should be something a lot of you may be interested in watching, and then we can come and talk about it at the end of the day. They are looking at this is the trial actually for the 4th person accused in the Dan Markel, who was an FSU law professor and a law school graduate. The person on trial is his former brother-in-law, Adelson, a respected dentist in the community, at least at the time of the murder. And we'll get into it. You'll find all about it then. Look, though, I don't miss any question. I'm going to go back quickly and see if there were some. Oh, I said hit the like button. Thank you for people who are noticing that and suggesting that. Yes, please. And please subscribe. We go live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Talk about all that everybody's talking about. So definitely you want to you want to come back for that. So hit subscribe, and I'm looking for questions. Okay, I'm not seeing questions, which is hard to see sometimes unless the question marks are at the beginning. So I may have missed it, but I'm going to be trying to do better at taking questions as we're going through. So I have a question too for y'all, which is I am thinking seriously about maybe sponsorship, and I wanted to get your ideas on that. Do you have some suggestions or thoughts on that? And don't forget, tomorrow night we have an extra live. We're going to be going in detail through that really interesting transcript between Richens and her brother. I want to say thank you to our moderators, Marlon and Mama Pinks. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you tomorrow night at 7.